Welcome back. In this video, we're going to learn all about lymph. What is it? Where does it come from? Where does it go to? Why do we even need it? So let's start out with what is it? To understand what lymph is, we need to go back to our arterioles and our venules and that capillary bed. So to refresh your memory, when blood enters the capillary bed, it has a high hydrostatic pressure, which sends some of the plasma from the blood outside of the blood vessel into the interstitial space. And so this is the same watery kind of fluid that plasma is with some protein. And then as the blood moves along the capillary bed on the venous side, because so much fluid has left, on the venous side, the blood has a really high oncotic pressure because the albumin is still there and has a high concentration. And so it kind of sucks some of that water back into it, some of that fluid in the interstitial space back into it. So over the course of the day, about 70 to 75% of your blood will actually leave the blood vessels and enter the interstitial space. And as you can see, you'd be pretty dead if none of it went back in. But 90% of it gets reabsorbed back in. But that would still mean you're losing 10% of your blood volume every day, which would leave you lightheaded and not able to do anything. So the rest of it has to enter the lymphatic system. So it's going to enter through some lymph structures whose names we will learn about shortly, and those lymph structures will eventually dump it back into the bloodstream. So when the fluid starts out in the blood, we call it plasma. When it's in the interstitial space, the fluid, we're going to call interstitial fluid. Okay? And then when that interstitial fluid enters inside lymphatic structures, we're now going to call it lymph. So it's the same thing, but as it moves, it has a name change. So just think of it as a street continuing on, and then it has a name change. All right, so let's start with the pathway. So the pathway starts with lymphatic capillaries, which are tucked up among regular blood capillaries. So anytime we say the word capillary, we are referring to blood capillaries where gas exchange is going to happen, unless we say lymphatic capillaries. And if we say lymphatic capillaries, that means we're not talking about gas exchange. And so the structure of lymphatic capillaries has got to be different from blood capillaries because we don't have an artery on one side and a vein on the other side. And in fact, if you look at them, there is a starting point. They are flat-ended. Now, they do have these little fibers of protein which help anchor them among the other capillaries. So as you move, they're not sliding out. They are nestled in among the other capillaries. And they do not have three tunicas. They're very similar to capillaries in that they are a simple squamous epithelium. However, there is no basement membrane around it. So think of them more like shingles, okay? So if this is the inside of the lymphatic capillary and this is the interstitial space out there, as the pressure increases outside, that pushes on the shingle, pushes on the simple squamous cell, opening a little gap for the fluid to easily enter into the lymphatic capillary as seen with these yellow arrows. And the other thing I want to point out is even in the capillaries, even in the lymphatic capillaries, there are valves to prevent backflow. So it's not just going to be in big lymphatic structures. It's going to start with the lymphatic capillaries. So unidirectional flow only. So once the fluid is in the capillaries are going to merge to form larger lymphatic structures known as lymphatic vessels. And the smallest of these resemble small veins in that they have a tunica intima, tunica media, tunica externa. So they will have a little bit of smooth muscle in their walls. They'll continue to have valves, as you can clearly see in this photomicrograph in the left lower quadrant of your picture. So movement here of the lymph is very much like movement of blood in the venous side. If we have sympathetic nervous system stimulating contraction of the smooth muscle, that'll make the diameter smaller, push it up. If the skeletal muscle surrounding its contraction, the same thing, or the pressure changes with breathing. Now, as these lymphatic vessels get larger and they merge, eventually they will form what we call lymphatic trunks. And these are our fairly large vessels. They're not the largest lymphatic structures, but these are significant enough that each major body region is going to be drained by a lymphatic trunk. So you'll have one from your right upper extremity, one from your left upper extremity, one from your head and neck on each side, one from each lower extremity, one from your abdomen and pelvis. Okay. And I want to point out that on the left picture, this big green dot right there in the middle, right below the rib cage at T12, is this structure known as the Cisterna Chyli, which we will talk more about shortly. So from the lymphatic trunks, where we still have about somewhere between a half a dozen and 10 lymphatic trunks, all of these have to merge into our final two vessels that collect all the lymph, and these are called the lymphatic ducts. And it's the lymphatic ducts that are responsible, as you can see up here in the neck area, for returning the lymph to the bloodstream. So this is the trachea and the esophagus behind it. This is the superior vena cava, and you can see these two green vessels dumping into the bloodstream. So these two lymphatic ducts have names which you should learn. The one on the right is called the right lymphatic duct. And life is not fair. It is not equal. The right lymphatic duct does not do the right side of the body. In fact, it only does about 25% of the body. So it only does the right side of the body down to the level of the diaphragm. So the right side of the head and neck, the right side of the chest, and the right upper extremity only. So there is only about less than 25% of the lymph generated in your body is going to be entering through the right lymphatic duct. Now the left lymphatic duct has a name, and it's quite significant in size. It's called the thoracic duct. And technically its origin is right there at that Cisterna Chyli. Because it's at the Cisterna Chyli that we have the regional trunks from the pelvis, abdomen, and lower extremities dumping in. So the left lymphatic duct, known as the thoracic duct, drains everything on the left half of your body, as well as everything below the diaphragm on the right. So well more than 75% of your body. Now, whether it's entering from the right or the left, both of these lymphatic ducts enter at the same place. It's at the junction where the internal jugular vein meets the subclavian vein. So right before it forms the brachiocephalic vein on each side, that's where the lymphatic ducts dump that in. And this is because these are our biggest veins on each side. So if we have fatty substances, or we have stuff in there, this is the area where it would have maximal blood dilution. So when we looked at our lymphatic structures, we went from a lymphatic capillary to lymphatic vessels to lymphatic trunks for each region to our final two lymphatic ducts known as the right lymphatic duct and the thoracic duct. So let me just point out that Cisterna Chyli one more time and get you comfortable with that term. It sits right at the level of L2. So you can see your lowest ribs going up here to about T12, and this is L1, and this is L2. And so what dumps into the Cisterna Chyli are the lymphatic trunks from the abdomen, the pelvis, and the lower limb. So that's what these little legs coming up to it from below, as well as all the dietary fat. So the bottom is A, D, E, and K, and everything coming in that's in the chyle. this is where it's draining. And so this picture on the lower left shows some lymphatic trunks coming from the pelvis and the lower extremities next to the major blood vessels dumping into the Cisterna Chyli. So take a minute and see if you can remember and fill out this lymphatic pathway. Great job. And with that, we are done with the path of lymph in the body. And come back as we start learning about sites where cells involved in immunity are produced, hang out, and work.